The Woodstock Music and Art Fair, the 3-day Aquarian Exposition at White Lake and Bethel, New York, will give you uncomplicated, unhurried, calm days of peace and music. Friday, August 15th, you'll hear stars such as Joan Baez, Arlo Guthrie, Tim Hardin, Richie Havens, Ravi Shankar, and many others.
My name is Richard Dix, and this is How Did That Happen? A podcast where I look at everyday things or events and try to figure out how they came to be. Every week I will research one topic, and by the end of the episode, I hope to truly have the answer to the question, how did that happen? Alright, and welcome back to another episode of How Did That Happen? HDTH. I'm your host, Richard Dix. This is episode number 88. We're going to talk about Woodstock today. We're going to talk about the great festival that was. But before we get there, as always, as customary, a little bit of housekeeping to get through. What am I watching? I tell you what, I just watched that Putin interview with Tucker Carlson and Putin. I'll be honest, I watched about half. I'm not going to sit here and say like I watched 2 hours of that. But I watched enough, and it was interesting. It was interesting. You have to give it some sort of credence. I mean, you don't have to take it for fully. It's definitely not completely factual, and there's nothing that's I don't know. I didn't wake up with any super crazy epiphanies or anything like that, but I do think what some of the stuff that he was saying about that he might have at some point tried to work with the West and that the West was not that receptive, I think that could be true. I think we've talked about some of these instances, not specifically what he was talking about, but like throughout the Cold War in this podcast, and how America really did have their own agenda, and even outside of the presidency, which is specifically what he was saying, was that more like the CIA, was the people who were more controlling the narrative, which does kind of seem true from what we've even talked about with the CIA. But I'm just saying, I don't know what's true and what's not true. I'm not there, but I just thought that is interesting. I saw it on Twitter, but it's actually on YouTube now if you want to check it out. It's like 2 hours. He goes on about Russian history for a long time. And I mean, to Tucker's credit, he lets him talk, and just lets. I don't know if I believe the stuff that he says about not wanting anything more than Ukraine, but he puts up a pretty good front, at least. I don't know. But what am I listening to? I haven't started it yet, but I'm about to start it. I'm about to start it here pretty soon. Maybe even this afternoon when I finish recording here. I just bought Matthew Perry's book. His let's get the name of it here. It was Matthew. Yeah, it's called Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. And I heard about it on a podcast that was talking about. It wasn't even talking about him, but the people that were on it said it was such a good book, and that he covers addiction in such a very good way that it's just they said a lot of people aren't talking about the way that he is. So I wanted to check it out. As always, we have the bite-sized bios, which of course now is no longer 2 episodes a month, but now down to 1 because we have the new addition to the How Did That Happen family, which is Current Conflicts, which will now be coming once a month. It's the first episode was on the insurgency in Maghreb, and we'll be covering. Like I said, conflicts from all around the world. We've got the next one will be somewhere in South America, I believe, and we're going to cover some ones in Asia. We're going to go back to Africa, just different places that I just, like I said, don't think are getting that much coverage. That's just worth talking about and worth hearing about. As always, you can find everything, all the extras at htthappen.com, at htthappen for all the socials, at htthappen22 for the TikTok. Let's see, I don't know if there's much else to say. Going to get into this Woodstock episode here. A lot of good music that was played here. I really had to sit back and humble myself over the last couple days and listen to some of this music, and it's really given me a new perspective on things. Give us 5 stars wherever you listen to this. 2 stars if you didn't like it. Tell us why you didn't like it, because constructive criticism is always welcome. But without further ado, as we know to do, here is the episode.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Joe Cocker, let's go for Sunday.
Yes. Well, good afternoon, and it's great to see you. Right, do what you want, get your uncles out. This is called Let's Get Stoned.
The summer of 1969 was marked by 3 extraordinary cultural events. The first, in June, was the Stonewall Riots. That marked the beginning of the struggle for civil rights by lesbian and gay Americans all across the country. In July, just the next month, the Apollo moon landing happened. And we set foot as humans on the moon. And the last extraordinary cultural event to occur in 1969 was the Woodstock Music Festival. This was a gathering of at least 450,000 people that came to be known as a symbol of fellowship, peace, and love throughout the next generations to come. We're going to talk about Woodstock as a whole and just how it came to be, and not so much the impact that it had on America, because I feel like that's understood. I don't need to sit here and tell you how much people have enjoyed that event occurred all those years ago, even now.
Saturday, August 16th, Canned Heat, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Grateful Dead, Janis Joplin, Jefferson Airplane, and The Who. Sunday, August 17th, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, Santana, Jimi Hendrix, Johnny Winter, and that's not all.
So the actual name for the entire festival was the Woodstock Music and Art Fair. And like I said a little bit earlier, you have to go back and look at what the world was to understand why it was so important to have a Woodstock. And truthfully, we're going to get fully into it. People that did it they didn't set out to have this great cultural event that'll live on through the next 50 to 70 years or however, long it's been going. It's memory, they were just trying to make money. In 69, like I said, Stonewall riots, we land on the moon. America is fully invested in the Vietnam War. We have covered the Vietnam War on this podcast. If you want to know more information about it, go back. I think it's about 10 episodes ago, give or take. But yeah, I mean, that's so within opposing sides. Everyone feels differently, and I'm gonna bring some stories to you here today about some people. We're gonna talk about a couple different things. The way that the war kind of intertwined itself within this actual event. We were in a place where the world. Not the world, I guess, but I mean, America really wasn't sure if differences truly could coexist. You know what I mean? We are here. We're at the place that we are now in 2024 with all of these differences that just abound, and they're just here and they're in your face, right? But that wasn't the world back then. We were slowly figuring out that it's okay to be different, and that doesn't have to lead to violence. But for a long time, it did. We talked about the civil rights movement as well. It's another episode. You can go back and check it out. I mean, that was all just because people were trying to have equal rights. Nobody was trying to take over the country. Nobody was trying to kill anybody. They just want to say, hey, what you have, I think I'm also entitled to as well. And it's not a crazy idea. But that's the world. That's the world that Woodstock is born into. It was created by four guys who were all in their 20s. They were all under 27. Michael Lang, Artie Cornfield, Joel Rosenman, and John Roberts. These are all four guys, and they kind of come from different parts of society a little bit. There's a couple stock trader guys, like Wall Street guys, and then there's a couple like music guys. Michael Lang is one of the main music guys who kind of oversees the entire creation of the actual Woodstock when like the place when they get to it. But there's guys that are on Wall Street who are just trying to make some money. What they really want to do, what they're really trying to do initially, is to just make money to build a music studio out in Woodstock, right, New York, because that's where a lot of musicians were living. Bob Dylan himself lived out there, but the issue was there was no music studio, and when Woodstock is not that far from New York City. It's about about 100 miles, give or take. It's like an hour and a half. You know what I mean, of driving. And they even said the NYPD actually did a little bit of the security there throughout some of the days of the festival. But back to it, they wanted to make a studio in Woodstock for all because it was there. And Michael Lang actually I think also lived in Woodstock as well because he was like in the music business. I forget his exact title, but he was heavily involved in the music industry. And so they wanted to get all these music. They wanted to have all these musicians to give them the chance to be able to record out there. And so they thought they didn't have enough money to do that. So they were like, if we put on a show and charge people for it, right, then we'll make enough money to build the studio. And so that was the entire idea behind Woodstock. It was not actually about let's create this peace and love environment that will live on forever. It's just how history happens. And so they go around and they actually try to get it to happen in Woodstock, right? They want the concert to happen in Woodstock. But the people in Woodstock don't want that to happen. So I mean, honestly, and it's called the Woodstock, festival and all that stuff. But it happened. I think it was about 30 miles away in a different town called Bethel. But they just kept it the name because I mean I guess it sounds better than Bethel. Woodstock sounds way better than Bethel, I guess. And when they got to Bethel, thankfully there was a man named Max Bernard Yasgur, who had a lot of land out there. He had a dairy farm, and he allowed them to use that space. And so the space that you see in all the videos and all the iconic photos is basically just like a 600-acre, I think, plot of his land that when they went to it, they were just like, I guess it just looked like the perfect place to have a festival. I guess like they kept saying it bowled out. I don't really know. I couldn't really see what that meant, but they mentioned it a lot of times, so I guess that's something. And so now they have the venue, right? Now we have a place for the festival to happen. Now we have to book the talent. Now the world has to know about it. They would take out ads in newspapers and let people know. I mean, this is back in the 60s. You couldn't just put it online. Kind of had to spread word of mouth. And a lot of people bought tickets. I think initially the tickets were, I think, either $16 or $18. And what would happen, I watched a documentary that was explaining it. What was interesting was that the people who didn't buy tickets showed up early, I guess to make sure they could get a ticket, right? And then the people who did buy tickets showed up later, and some of them had a lot of trouble actually getting into the festival because, like we said, there was a lot of traffic, and they basically had all the roads blocked off for about 72 hours. You couldn't really get in or out by vehicle. But so got the venue, first talent that they book, CCR, Creedence Clearwater Revival. And once they book them, then a lot of other acts start to come. There is I think a total of 32 different singers and bands performed over that 2 to 3 day period. Really, I think it spread to actually 4 days if you count the morning, I think, of when Jimi Hendrix actually ended up ending the festival. But there were bands like, or the people like Joan Baez, Arlo Guthrie, Ravi Shankar, Sweetwater, Country Joe McDonald, John Sebastian, Canned Heat. The Grateful Dead was there. Carlos Santana was there, and he was said to be tripping on, I think, LSD. They said, from what I understand, unless I heard it wrong, he thought when he was playing the guitar that he was holding like this huge snake or something like that, and it was trying to like wiggle away from him. And if you can watch on the video, he was making some weird faces. I don't know if he's making those kind of faces, like that he's fighting that kind of battle, but he was definitely like, going through something during that set. But yeah, so let's see, we've covered the beginning. So the festival is initially, like I said, they charged, right? They charged money for it. But once it started, because they were basically not, they were ill-equipped. They weren't fully set up for as many people as showed up. Like I said, they wanted to do like 50,000 people, 500,000 people showed up. And so once that happened, they realized that they didn't have the fencing structure, they didn't have any of the ticket booths set up to actually even just take in that amount of people. They just made it a free festival, which is, I think, what ends up making it even more iconic is it was open to so many people. And that's, I think you look at all the other some other instances in time where there's been so many people like that. If you charge money, it does tend to detract. Some people just won't show up. But they made it free. Word got out, and it just swarmed.
More than 200,000 followers of pop music have jammed the Catskills mountain hamlet of Bethel for a rock music festival. Cars are being abandoned on highways leading to the resort area. Festival producers have called for all vehicles heading to that festival to turn back home.
People, they said, and this I don't know if I would ever do. This is what they said people were doing because the traffic was so bad. People would abandon their cars, just leave your car in the street and walk some like 10 miles to get to the actual festival. I don't know if I'd leave my car. I just don't know if I'd do that. I don't, like just thinking about it, that just doesn't sound like something that I would do. But once they got there, there wasn't much shelter, wasn't much of that going around. A lot of people had tents, some blanket action was really happening, but there weren't like a lot of any like large, like full scale structures. So people were really muddy. They say one of the biggest things that people had problems with there was foot cuts. Everyone was getting their feet cut because everyone wanted to be barefoot and be all bohemian, all good stuff. But they don't know that comes with Those people that do that, they have calluses on their feet. You can't just roll up and start being barefoot in the field. Your feet will get cut. That's just going to happen. But even though it was a peace and love type of affair, there were two actual deaths that did occur. One is not that surprising. One thing we believe was just a drug overdose. Not just a drug overdose, but I mean, it's just, if it's at a festival where a lot of drugs are happening, it's not as surprising that would occur as to the other one that I'm about to tell you about. 17-year-old Raymond Mizak was run over while he was sleeping in his sleeping bag. He was run over by a tractor that was collecting trash, trying to clear out the field for the next day. I think he was killed on the second day. What they say here is a statement from one of the drivers, who was 29 years old, said, quote, "We went over this route twice to clear the passage of people and garbage before trying to get through. The first we noticed anything was when a person yelled at us. I saw the victim and yelled to get a doctor and ambulance," end quote. I mean, that's the guy. So, I mean, this guy is just sleeping in his sleeping bag. 17-year-old kid, 17-year-old Raymond, and he gets run over by a tractor. And I think what that guy said, basically the first time that he knew about it was when the guy who's getting run over is telling him, "Hey man, I'm getting run over." Oh man, oh man. But yeah, I was trying to see if there's anything else interesting about the Woodstock. I mean, because we all know it, and I didn't want to just go in depth, to it. I just wanted to really kind of cover it. There's some interesting, things that happened. Like I said, with the guy that just got run over. We talked about Janis Joplin and her role in Woodstock. We covered that on the last bite-sized bio, so it's not really worth talking about too much. But she was, she was there, and she was way too intoxicated to really put on a good show. Only because they showed up so early to Woodstock, but they were actually, they were in the wrong place. They would end up going on for a lot later. So she ended up just doing a lot of different drugs. And then when they made the movie about Woodstock, she asked for her part of that, for her performance to be removed, and it was. All right, and the last thing that I'll do here, that we'll close out with, is I read this story that I just thought was the firsthand account of this young guy who went to Woodstock, and I think it stuck out to me because he was in the same place that I'm from. He was in Virginia Beach, Virginia, when he got word of, when he finally found out about what Woodstock was going to be. And I'm just going to read it. It's pretty lengthy. So, I mean, if you choose to skip on and, if you want to just be done with this episode, that's fine. But I think this is worth, it's just interesting to hear about, I don't know, his entire ordeal with trying to get to something that he didn't know would be iconic, but he could feel maybe that it was, and it ended up being, and it kind of just paid off. So, I was there. Jim Williams, age 19. Now, I'm reading as he's writing. I was in the Navy. We were in Virginia Beach, Virginia. My ship was going to head off to Vietnam, and it was all over everywhere about Woodstock being about to happen. So me and another guy went AWOL, absent without leave. We jumped ship and hitchhiked up to Woodstock. Nowadays, nobody would pick you up if you get hitchhiked, but back then you would get a lot of rides. The hippies would give anybody rides. Most of them were broke, but they would give me dried fruit or whatever they had, a lot of free love, and a lot of, "Hey man, take a hit off this joint." And because I was AWOL, they were on my side. Totally, "Man, we'll take care of you." It was neat. Janis, I liked a lot and got to see her a couple times, but at Woodstock, she was so wasted, her actual performance really wasn't that good. Jimmy was the headliner, and he played last on everything. He got paid more than everybody else, too, I heard. Everybody was so exhausted, they just started leaving because they were freaking out about how they were going to get home, because the roads were all blocked. When Jimmy played, it was the last day, and so many people had left you could get right up close. I just kept waiting for him at the end. Man, if you had made it the whole 3 days, you were exhausted. I was exhausted. I dropped a bunch of acid. Everything was free. We didn't have a dime. We were AWOL and we ate free. We got free pot, free LSD, and everything. It was like a 3-day party. It seemed like it was 700,000 people strong when it was really going. When The Who played, there were 69 bands. At the end, for the people who got to see, it was like, God, what a performance. It was like, nobody's here. I'm looking around and where is everybody? Being at Woodstock turned out to be a massive big deal. At the time, it was just, man, what a massive concert this turned out to be. Later, it was the greatest concert in history because all the bands that were there. And Jimmy was beautiful. He looked really cool. He was polished. He was great. After Woodstock, I finally got back home and lost a bunch of weight and then went and snuck into my girlfriend's bedroom. Her ma found out I was there and called the FBI. That morning, they kicked the door in. I'm stark naked, and these great big dudes jerk me out of bed. I'm down to about 175 pounds, so I'm light. I lost a lot of weight. And these two guys are 6'6", 285 pounds. They jerked me out of bed, dragged me out to the front yard, and handcuffed me naked. I said, Jesus Christ, can I get some pants? Then they realized I'm not some killer like the girlfriend's mother said, and so they said, okay, and took me back to the bedroom, and I got to put clothes on. Then they took me to the Treasure Island Naval Base in San Francisco on Bay Bridge. I got thrown into what's called restricted barracks and waited for my court-martial. They threw me in the brig for 30 days. The Vietnam War was going on, but the kicker was that it was the East Coast that I went AWOL from, so that saved me. Because normally they send you back to your ship, and you're screwed. Well, my ship had gone over to Nam, so they said, okay, you're going to do 30 days, and you're going to stay here in California. And I said, great. And as soon as they let me go, I found a lawyer in San Francisco helping people get out of the service legally, and he said, give me $500, and I can get you out. He told me what to do. I borrowed $500 off my dad and went AWOL again. Then turned myself in and went back to the brig. When I got out the second time, they said, we got to shrink. And the lawyer said, here's what you say. Act like you're going to lose it, and then tell them you're going to kill somebody if they give you any more orders. I got out on a passive-aggressive thing, like I couldn't control my anger. It cost me $5, but I got out after doing a year and a couple of months, so they couldn't draft me again, because they were drafting people back then. And that's why I joined in the first place, so I wouldn't go to Nam in the front line. I would have been stuck. Our ship was going to be 9 months on the ocean right outside Vietnam, launching and recovering jets. It was a big decision to go AWOL, but it all worked out. I didn't get killed anyway. The day I got out of the brig, I got out of the Navy and I got a general discharge that turned honorable 6 months later, if you put in for it with all the benefits and everything. I did 7 months of what's called good time and the other 5 months bad time in the brig, or AWOL. So when I got out, my opinion was that I didn't get drafted and I got to see Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock. End quote, basically. And I included that because, I mean, isn't that a story? That's a story. That dude was 19 years old. He was in the Navy. He heard about Woodstock. He said, oh, you know what? I'm out of here. You know what I mean? Like, boom. Like, I'm leaving my post. Going to party my butt off in Woodstock. Does so. Gets to see all the great bands. Gets to see Jimmy. He's one of the last 30,000 people, because he makes a good point. By the time Jimi Hendrix played, it was in the morning. It was, and people were gone. Of the 500,000 people that were there, it was only 30,000 people left. And so he said you could get a really good view. You know, is what he said. You get to see Jimi Hendrix do that. You go back home. Your girlfriend's mom calls the FBI, not the cops, the FBI, and they come arrest you when you're butt naked and drag you out of the house butt naked. You know there's neighbors. You know everybody's watching that. And he's like, can I put some pants on? And they're like, wait, you didn't murder anybody? Yeah, go put some pants on, kid. It's just a story. And then this guy goes to jail for going AWOL, and then finds a lawyer that basically has him develop some sort of passive aggressive like anxiety that gets him out of the military, and so it doesn't even really matter at the end of the day. Crazy story that I thought would illustrate more than if I just told you a bunch of other stuff that you've heard. Because Woodstock is well known. Like I said, I'm not going to tell you too much stuff that you don't know, but to me that's a story. That's a story of a man who lived a life. Jim Williams, he was there. All right, that was Woodstock. Learned a lot about Woodstock. First off, that it didn't actually happen in Woodstock. That's a little tidbit to take home for everybody. It happened in Bethel, New York. Who knew, right? A lot of great music. I think it is one of the. It's important to frame it like I did in the beginning of the episode, with all of the things that happened in that summer of '69, and how that was. You know, it was just the end of an era. It really was, and it's why it's one of the last episodes that we'll be doing in this series, the 40s to 70s series, as we come to the end of the 60s and into the 70s. It's just things have changed. You know, things will continue to progress, and as they were saying, this generation felt really lost at this time because all the people who had come and tried to make a difference in that decade had been gunned down. You know, I've talked about it a lot. We've mentioned it numerous times. If you had a K in your name in the 60s, you were getting shot. You were getting murdered. You're probably getting gunned down by your government. You know, that's why Jackie O felt the need to leave the country and marry some Turkish billionaire. Or was it Greek? Greek or Turkish? Onassis, that guy. Because he had his own security. Literally why she did it. Because this man had his own security that was above the military. It was above the army. Because she knew as well as RFK knew, that it didn't matter whether you were being protected by America's army, because if America deemed you to be the next one to get murdered, you're going to get murdered accidentally, right? And so that's why these people, these kids, these are the boomers. These are the kids that were born after everybody came back from World War II, right? These kids had to find a way to try to coexist and show the world that they could coexist, and that peace and love is possible. It was a big deal. It was a big deal. I tried to cover it in a way that I thought was, good for me, because, like I said, I mean, you can find numerous documentaries and books and stuff all about there. I just try to find different things that I thought were interesting, and of course, there's more stuff that we didn't quite get to that will be on the mini episode. In the mini episode, the next one will be on one of the acts that played during this 3-day set list. Just a little nugget there, a little mystery for you guys. Yeah, I hope you liked it. I don't think there's much else to say before we go ahead and get out of here. I will play you out with the first guy who played at Woodstock. So his name is Richie Havens, right? And so he wasn't supposed to be the first act. I think he on the bill, on the list, he was like third, right? But because it was so packed, because there were so many people trying to get to Woodstock, like I said, people were just leaving their cars in the middle of the road and just walking, right? The musicians couldn't get to the stage. So they had to come to him, since he was already there, and say, "Hey, can you start playing?" Right? He played. I think the longest set of anybody of that entire festival, because he was literally just stalling. He played for 45 minutes, but he played some beautiful music, like some beautiful stuff. We'll play out his song "Freedom" here in a second. But yeah, always httavin.com for all the extras. You can find all the videos and stuff that I found. Will be up on the website. When this publishes, at HTThappen for all the socials, at HTThappen22 for the TikTok. I always appreciate you guys coming back and pressing play from week to week. I really do. And we'll see you next week with the next bite-sized bios.
Freedom, 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 freedom. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Along the way from my home, yeah, Lord, singing freedom.